Good morning. As always, I hope the vocab quiz was to your liking, that you had studied for it and found it fairly easy to accomplish. We're going to keep moving forward in chapter 2. We're looking at the spread of civilization, and out of chapter 2, section 2, in particular, peoples in the Eastern Mediterranean. Our essential questions for this section: how does geography affect the development of civilizations, and in what ways do civilizations influence each other? The story matters because after about 1200 BC, there was no dominant power in Western Asia. The Phoenicians emerged as the most important trading kingdom in the Eastern Mediterranean area. The Israelites did not create an empire, but they left a world religion, Judaism, that also influenced the later religions of Christianity and Islam. So let's break this down and let's look at some of these different peoples and places that we're going to come across when we talk about the peoples in the Eastern Mediterranean. Here's our bell ringer: Indo-European languages. The languages in the Indo-European family descend from a single parent language. This family contains 10 main branches, one of which is the Germanic branch, which includes the English language. Among the other Indo-European languages are Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. All these languages share certain characteristics, so that words with the same meaning are often similar in various Indo-European languages. For example, an ancient Greek word for house is doma, and the Latin word for house is domus. Now, in our religion, in Christianity, we talk about languages. If you understand the story, the Tower of Babel, where the people were building this tower up to God, and this is the Old Testament. They're building this tower up to God so they can be closer to God, and God took displeasure with this. And so he struck them down, and he dispersed their tower, dispersed their peoples, and he split them up into all different languages. And that, I believe, I'm pretty sure, is where the term Babel comes from. If you can't understand someone, they babble. They say things that don't mean anything. When he destroyed the tower and split their languages into different languages, they couldn't understand each other. They were babbling. Now, of these different languages they were speaking, it all came from one unified original language that they spoke before this incident in our religion. So this, to me, is the explanation behind the single parent language that all these different languages come from. What English words might these words from other Indo-European languages be related to? So let's look at some of these words. Okay, so here's a word called pater or pater. It is Latin. Pater is also Greek. Pitar is Sanskrit. What word in the English language do you think these words might be related to? Pater, pater, pitar. Which of these words, which word in our English language do you think these three words relate to? They relate to father, papa. We want to talk now about early nomadic people. The question that we want to ask to understand these nomadic people is, what influence did they have on peoples and civilized societies? What we need to understand is that the nomadic peoples helped spread languages, goods, and new technologies. We'll discuss the migrations of the Indo-European peoples and talk a little bit about the Hittite Empire and about sea peoples. So early nomadic people relied on hunting and gathering, herding, and sometimes farming for their survival. Pastoral nomads carried goods and new technologies between civilizations. They would occasionally attack or even overrun settled communities and establish their own empires there. So these people were responsible for the intermingling of cultures, for the intermingling of civilizations, technologies, languages, and goods. Indo-Europeans migrated from southwestern Asia into India, into Western Asia, and then into Europe in about 2000 BC. And along the way, they left a mark and they picked something up and carried it with them and integrated that into the next civilization that they encountered. One group of Indo-Europeans, along with native peoples, established the Hittite Empire in Anatolia in about 1600 BC. They were the first Indo-Europeans to use iron. Then we have invading, quote unquote, sea peoples. Everybody do the air quotes, quote, quote. Sea peoples destroyed the Hittite Empire in about 1200 BC. So what are these, quote, quote, do the air quotes, sea peoples? Sea peoples is a name that comprises all of the groups of aggressive seafarers who invaded eastern Anatolia, Syria, Palestine, Cyprus, and Egypt toward the end of the Bronze Age. Groups that have been tentatively identified as members of the Sea Peoples include the Tyrrhenians, a group of sailors and pirates from Anatolia who were ancestors of the Etruscans and the Sherden, probably from Sardinia. The Sherden were so bold as to sail into the Nile Delta and attack Egypt in the 13th century BC, but they were defeated. Let's talk now more about the role of nomadic peoples. What technology gave the Hittites an advantage over other groups? Please don't just wait for the answer. Pause the video, go find an answer for yourself, do some investigation. It will help you learn. Don't just wait for me. Pause the video, and when we come back, we'll talk about it. Our question is, what technology gave the Hittites an advantage over other groups? Here's our answer. They knew how to make weapons out of iron. This is what my father-in-law likes to call peace through superior firepower. In other words, he who has the bigger weapon shall surely make peace, whether that peace must come through war to settle someone down and then make them understand that peace is better, or through deterrence. This is something that we see throughout society. We get the arms race out of it, the nuclear arms race, which, thank God, never resulted in a hot war. Our next question is, why might the Mediterranean have been important in the movements of early peoples? Again, pause the video, find an answer. When we come back, we'll talk about it. Our question is, why might the Mediterranean have been important in the movements of early peoples? Here's our answer. It allowed peoples to move easily from one region to another by ship. We're talking about the Mediterranean Sea, right there over the northern coast of Africa, the southern coast of Europe, Spain, Italy, France, and the eastern coast of the Middle East. Let's talk now about the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a very interesting people. The question that we want to ask about them is, what were their cultural and economic accomplishments? What were the cultural and economic accomplishments of the Phoenicians? We also want to understand the development of the Phoenician trading empire and their contribution to the development of the alphabet. So let's talk now about the Phoenicians. Trade. Trade was one big area that the Phoenicians helped us in, or helped the ancient Egyptian kingdom in. The Phoenicians took advantages of their geographical position and shipbuilding prowess to establish far-reaching trade routes, reaching as far as Britain and Africa's west coast. So they really got out there. The Phoenicians really got out there and intermingled with other civilizations. They saw the world. Well, I talked about briefly the alphabet. The Phoenicians used 22 different symbols to represent the sounds of their speech. The Arabic alphabet, the Greek and Roman alphabets, and most of the other alphabets used today can be traced to the Phoenician alphabet. Now let's talk about why this is a great accomplishment. Now we can get away from emojis. We can get away from ideograms. Imagine if you spoke in emojis where every single thing you said had to have a picture, if you had to draw it out. Now they can use these letters that represent the sounds of their speech. Think about the letter B in our alphabet. Put your lips together and make a B. When you think about it, the B actually looks how it sounds. To me, if you turn the B sideways, it looks like the top and bottom of a pair of lips coming together to make the B sound. It looks like it's ready to actually burst out of the middle of the letter B. So to me, the alphabet is a huge development. To most historians, it's a huge development because now they can get away from pictures, hieroglyphics, ideograms, and get into an even more complex way of writing and reading. And now think about how many more words that they can develop from having these new sounds. They can actually create words by combining words. It's hard to create words by combining two pictures. Carrying on with the Phoenicians, how did the location of the Phoenicians influence the growth of their civilization? This is on your own. You're going to need to look this up. Again, do some research, get through your book, get in your book, whether it's digital or whether it's the hard copy. It will help you with the test. When we come back, we'll have an answer for you. Pause the video. Our question is, how did the location of the Phoenicians influence the growth of their civilization? Well, their natural resources and proximity to the sea benefited trade. Through trade, they grew prosperous. They spread their culture and assimilated ideals from other societies. Our next question is, in what way did the Phoenician alphabet differ from Egyptian writing? We just spoke about that. We just talked about that. So we're not going to pause. That answer should be fresh in your mind. The Phoenician symbols represented sounds rather than ideals or objects. And this is a huge leap forward in education and in overall the civilization of the Phoenicians. Let's take a look now at this alphabet that we're speaking so much about. The Phoenicians simplified their writing by using 22 different signs to represent the sounds of their speech. The Greeks later based their alphabet on the Phoenician signs, and their alphabet was adapted by the Romans to create the alphabet that we use today. Now, as you see at the bottom of our chart, Imperial Latin did not distinguish between I and J or between V and U. There was no W, Y, and Z were introduced. There was no W, Y, and Z were introduced after 100 BC for foreign words only. So we see how the alphabet has evolved and how it was adapted by other societies. The Hebrew alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, and now the Imperial Latin alphabet, which is what we understand our alphabet to be today. Moving on, let's talk now about the Israelites. They were Jews and monotheistic. They believed in one God who created the world and everything in it. God made a covenant or a contract to protect the Jews if they followed his Torah or precepts. The Ten Commandments are one important part of the Torah. Jewish prophets called for social justice and concern for all humanity. Judaism has influenced Christianity and also Islam. So this is basically seeing the early branches of what becomes known later as Christianity, what becomes known later as Islam. It begins with the Israelites, with the Jews. If you have a religion class, if you've taken religion, which you probably have, maybe you've touched on some of these things. And if you haven't, and you will, this will be a good connect through the history and the actual religion of these cultures. So talking about the Israelites, what are the fundamental laws that govern the Jewish people? And what relationship with God do the laws represent? Again, this is a lengthy question. This is one that I want you to go find for yourself. I will give you the answer, but please do some research for yourself. Be a historian, take pride in your education, and get the answer for yourself. Pause the video. When we come back, we'll talk about it. Our question is, what are the fundamental laws that govern the Jewish people, and what relationship with God do the laws represent? Well, the Ten Commandments that Moses received from God are the fundamental laws for Jews, and they represent a covenant between the one God and the Jewish people. And we still serve and live by these Ten Commandments today. It's a lasting testament to God's power and also to the covenant that the Jews had with God, that they lived by then and we still live by now, the Ten Commandments. Now, later on, we're actually going to see laws evolve out of the Ten Commandments. There's a reason why, thou shalt not kill is basically a law now. You shouldn't murder people. Theft is a law because of the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. But then we're going to talk about what we fall into in modern times is, can you police one's morality? There are certain things that are clearly, visibly against the law, against God's will, but other things which are just deviant behaviors that one can participate in. Can you regulate morality through law? And that's a huge question that we'll investigate once we come up more on the Ten Commandments and the laws that came out of them. Let's talk now about the Minoans. The Minoan civilization flourished for many centuries on the Mediterranean island of Crete. About 1450 BC, however, the culture essentially vanished when a disaster of some kind struck the civilization's population centers. Exactly what happened is uncertain, but there are two main theories, and we'll talk about both of them. So here's our theory. The civilization was destroyed by the eruption of a volcano on the nearby island of Thera. Here are arguments that support this evidence. There was a massive eruption on Thera shortly before 1450 BC. The eruption destroyed the entire population of the island. Thera was an important trading post for the Minoans. Its loss probably damaged the Minoan ability to trade with other cultures. So they've lost this ability to trade. It was an outpost for them. Maybe now their food sources and things that they need are no longer available, and the culture will suffer because of it. The eruption may have pumped sulfur dioxide into the sky. This would have lowered the temperatures and caused their crop harvest to fail, which would have starved them. There is evidence that ash from the volcano may have covered much of Crete. This would also have interfered with agriculture. The eruption probably unleashed a tsunami with waves up to 50 feet. The tsunami would have battered the northern coast of Crete, which would have flooded the communities and destroyed fishing boats. So in conclusion, the eruption of the volcano led to diminished trade, poor harvests, and the loss of towns and villages. These setbacks proved too much for the Minoans to overcome, and the culture may have collapsed. So here's our second theory. The island was invaded by the Mycenaeans, a people from mainland Greece. Here are arguments and supporting evidence of this theory. Around 1450 BC, the style of pottery common in Crete changed from Minoan to Mycenaean. The change indicates the arrival of the Mycenaeans. At about the same time, Crete began using Greek for administrative purposes. This change suggests that the Mycenaeans held political power on Crete soon after their arrival. The Minoans were a successful trading people. They were known throughout the region for their wealth, which would have made them a target for invaders. The Minoans probably did not spend much time or money defending Crete from foreign powers. A strong military could have defeated the Minoans. So, in conclusion to the theory that the island was invaded by the Mycenaeans, the wealth and the weak defenses of the Minoans attracted the Mycenaeans' attention. The Mycenaeans attacked, took over, and replaced Minoan culture with their own. So we've looked at two different ways that the Minoan civilization may have been snuffed out. We don't know for sure, but both of those theories sound pretty good. Maybe one day you'll be the historian that puts the missing link to the puzzle together and finds out exactly what did happen. All right, so let's do a little food for thought. Why do historians believe that the Minoan civilization was advanced? We just discussed this. The place at Konos had many elaborate rooms. The palace at Konos had many elaborate rooms, workshops for making vases, jewelry, paintings, and ivory figurines, bathrooms with drains, jewelry, paintings, all these different things suggested that the Minoan civilization was advanced, that they were pretty far ahead in their development. Let's review now. Chapter 2, Lesson 2, the peoples in the Eastern Mediterranean. One group of Indo-Europeans, along with native peoples, established the Hittite Empire in Anatolia in about 1600 BC. They were the first Indo-Europeans to use iron. The Phoenicians used 22 different symbols to represent their sounds of their speech. The Arabic alphabet, the Greek and Roman alphabets, and most of the other alphabets used today can be traced to the Phoenician alphabet. This is important information for your test. Jews are monotheistic and believe in one God who created the world and everything in it. The Ten Commandments are one important part of the Torah. Judaism has influenced Christianity and Islam. Well, that brings us to a close on our second lesson of chapter 2. As always, make sure you're doing your chapter vocabulary, adding words to the vocab glossary, and using those to study for your tests and quizzes. Make sure if you have any questions, drop in on the Q&A board. Email me if you got to, or just raise your hand and get me. I'll answer any questions. I'm here for you. Remember, you do have a GRA on this section that is due by midnight tonight. With your lesson, you know the late policy, so let's go ahead and get everything turned in on time. If there's no other questions, comments, or concerns, I wish you all a good day. See you tomorrow. Be sure to study for your quiz.